And the court ultimately recoiled from that, and it said, look, no matter what else government does, it's not in the business of judging people's religious beliefs.
Supreme Court justices side in favor of a baker who refused to make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple. But legal experts say the broader debate isn't over. This case started back in 2012 after baker Jack Phillips refused to make a wedding cake for a gay couple. The Colorado Civil Rights Commission called that refusal illegal and took him to court.
And today, in a 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the baker, in part because justices say the Colorado Commission showed hostility toward the baker and his religious beliefs.
Again, the ruling was specific to this one case. It does not set a precedent.
And reporter Grant Robinson talks to one shop owner who worries that we'll see an opposite ruling in a future case. Grant?
Beth, Brandon, all eyes were on the court to draw a line where equality, freedom of speech, and freedom of expression meet. And the ruling in favor of the baker surprised some Christians.
When the Supreme Court ruled to make gay marriage legal in 2015, Jeff Amyx made sure everyone entering his hardware store knew what he believed. Today's decision brought a different emotion.
I was shocked. I was really shocked because of the track record of our Supreme Court.
Since the court's opinion was so specific to the Colorado case, legal experts say it's not a precedent-setting case, and that has Amyx worried that a future court will take the same issue but rule differently.
Right now we're seeing a ray of sunshine. This is happy days for Christians all over America, but dark days will come.
The case centered around issues of equality versus freedom of religion and freedom of expression. Stuart Harris teaches constitutional law at LMU and says the court essentially punted those big picture issues that need to be resolved.
And of all those issues, the only one they even sort of tangentially addressed was free exercise of religion. Didn't address free speech, didn't really address equality, except to say that, gay people should be treated like other people. Well, that's nothing new either.
The Supreme Court said that the Colorado Commission showed clear hostility toward the baker's religious beliefs, something that Amyx says will continue regardless of the Supreme Court's ruling.
Christianity's under attack. This is a great win, don't get me wrong, but this is not the end. This is just the beginning.
Now it's up to another case to work its way up to the Supreme Court. Once they have one without hostility to one or both of the parties involved, Harris says then the court might make a decision that further clarifies the law. Guys.
All right, Grant Robinson with the report tonight. Thank you very much.